It's another morning, the start of another day here in Wellington, and it's a bit cloudy out there. And I'm sitting down to a day of looking at more scores. I'm feeling like I am in the groove. I don't know if I'm on a roll yet, but I am definitely in the groove and enjoying looking at these scores. And apologies for there was a video a couple of releases ago that had a problem with the audio, but I hope that I fixed it enough so people were able to hear my evaluations without too much irritation. Dominique, I really like this score. There's a lot about it that's good that doesn't really come through because of the balance of a couple of things, and also just because of the the inability of the mock-up sounds to express what you intend. There's a lot about this that is very much in the style of Beethoven, I would say. Certainly it's expressed in ways that Beethoven wouldn't have, but the sound and the effect is very similar to Beethoven's orchestration, and for that you should be commended. There might be a little bit of a misunderstanding about my proposition that some of my participants should try out the natural horns. There are some things here that certainly would work on these horns if you're willing to put up with a few stopped and half-stopped notes. And I almost wish that that people would actually, when they look over the chart of which notes are stopped and half-stopped, and then maybe listen to their entry with, say, maybe like an X, or sorry, not an X, like a cross mark over the note that would trigger like a kind of a muted sound or a stopped sound in the mock-up, right? Just so that they could really hear how that kind of biting sound would really change the flow of something very beautiful and sonorous, like this clarinet solo here. Okay, so some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about will be some basic engraving and score things, and of course I'm going to be spending some time on talking about your orchestration and how it works, and what parts are commendable and so on, and what parts need a little bit more work, or what are some alternate ways of doing things. I was listening to this opening, and starting with my evaluation criteria, does the intro set the mood effectively? I feel that even as slow as 42 is, it still feels rushed to me with the way that you did this. I think like 34 or 32, would probably be a better, like if you listen to the tempo that Spencer Myer is taking things, right? It's really slow. But of course, the 120 I can't fault because I think I assigned that myself. It really does sound beautiful. I think you have a good sense for this, and little timekeeping by double bass pizzicato and so on. So, does the intro set the mood effectively? I feel that it does. I really love the slurring in the solo clarinet part. Okay, now you must understand, Dominique, that it is not sufficient for somebody just to write solo on a woodwind part. Because who's playing solo? Is it the first player? Is it the second player? You must always indicate if it is a single player. And there's no need to capitalize the word solo anymore, right? This is really what you should put on there. But you know something? There's really almost no need to even write the word solo, right? You could just leave that off and just tell us that it's the first player. The position of this part over all of the others, over all of the horns, is sufficient enough that the clarinet player will know that they're playing they're playing a solo or they're playing a featured line, really. As to the horn scoring, I would consider just looking at how many times you use notes that are not natural notes, right? And you don't really, and especially like looking further on here, there are so many notes in your natural horn parts that are not really part of the overtone scheme. There is really no need for you to have natural horns at all. I would say if you're going to come back to this and score it out and maybe try to get it performed or something like that, just go back to just modern horns in F, right? Just chromatic horns for all the parts. And then I think that'll be much, much clearer. And that's what they're going to end up playing it on anyways. Now, here I think you should have continued holding this all the way through with the fermata on it, rather than just leaving this one single note just hanging in the air with nothing underneath it except for your fourth horn and your lower strings, right? Which, by the way, doesn't your fourth horn need a fermata mark on it? Right? Doesn't. I hate that jumping repositioning that Sibelius does. So yeah, and then wouldn't these rests also need some kind of fermata sign on them as well, right? Or if you take my advice, just have everything be right. See, I feel that this just is, it keeps the consistency going all the way through, even though Beethoven wrote just a little eighth note on his C that the pianist always holds that C, that F written C and here in the horn, but the sounding F, they hold it with their thumb as they play this little da 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 dum. That's one of those subtleties that I feel I should have maybe talked about a little bit more in my guidelines for scoring this. Now, do you really want to slur over a repeated note? Wouldn't it be better to go da 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 rather than da? I just feel like you want. Okay. I feel that you want this to be articulated as a separate note, right? Okay, other than all of those little caveats, I feel that you have a nice, strong beginning here, and I really love this one low horn right here, just playing a nice pedal tone. Okay, well, it's not exactly a pedal tone, but a pedal underneath the harmony and so on, or the chorale. Okay, so moving onwards, Allegro non troppo. So your slurring, essentially, for the most part, it imitates what is happening in the piano part. And I think I did talk a little bit about how you shouldn't just use the piano scoring in terms of slurs and so on, because your string players need to know when to bow, right? So here you are asking your first violinists to play all of this under one bow. So probably, let's say, down bow, or up bow. Let's say that this was an up bow. So it would sound something like this: up, down, up, down. So those would be, so these are things that you need to sing to yourself as you think them out. Wouldn't it be, don't you think it might be a little bit better to do something like this, right? Or even do something like this. Oops, sorry. Right? You could easily break up the bow this way, so they were going up, down, up, and then here, this could all be divided like this. down, up, down. Do you see what I mean? So it has a smoother kind of playing, right? And then when you have situations like this where you have a repeated note, you might want to score it like this. Oops. When you add the tenutos here, this makes it portato, right? So it has a kind of a slightly pulsing sound that's connected, nicely connected. And you could also do that here with your cello parts too. These could all be portato or could just be left as they were, right? So, anyways, my screen keeps jumping around this morning. So those are just a few suggestions. I'll just leave them on the screen rather than correcting them. Then, of course, here, your clarinet part, or your oboe part, excuse me, could easily take all of this under one long line. So now here, you're not telling us who's supposed to be playing. Who's supposed to be playing, right? And do you really want a solo? Or do you want your first oboe player to be blending in with what's going on in the first violins? I suspect it's the latter, right? And once again, you don't need the word solo, right? You just need the first part. And all this just leads to the question of, is this melody starting with elegance, right? Is this passage, is there a natural transition to the octaves? Here, is there an expansion without clogging up? Yeah, I mean, I feel that you more or less do all of those things here. I think that it's lovely just to add a little bit of color and weight behind the first violin line with the oboe, right? That works better for me than having the oboe sort of play a solo while the violins are kind of playing behind them. I don't think that is as good as the first violins being the main focus of the listener with a little bit of oboe color, right? I think that's like, if that's your intention, then that's fine. The natural transition to octaves here is done, it's textbook, really. And I feel this is all really nice here in the cello. And, yeah. And this sort of pulsing on the offbeat here in your cellos and then violas. I think that works really, really well to keep a natural flow going. And once again, if this were portato, I think that would have just a very natural pulse to it, right? Speaking of pulse. Now that takes us to this next leggermente section, right? And I think that the leggermente needs to go under those parts that are actually nimble, right? Leggermente is sort of nimble, spry, adept, however you want to put it. So you would want to put that there because obviously, sorry, my screen's jumping around again. Obviously, there's nothing leggermente about plucking a couple of A's pizzicato, right? And then same thing here. Watch, my screen's going to jump. Yep. Okay. So, yeah, so just put the leggermente under and over those parts. So, for instance, here, there could have been a leggermente over the first oboe part, right? And here under this, or over this first bassoon part. So the question here is there a clear contrast with the theme? And is there a contrast between the lines? And is harmonic support needed? So you answered all those questions yes, right? Because even though you are still, you're keeping part of the melody in the strings, you're also sort of sweetening it by having the first flute on top and then trading off to the first oboe And this will be heard clearly above. However, you have not given us any kind of dynamic here, nor is there any dynamic differentiation between this passage here and what happened afterwards, right? So just because there isn't any in the piano part doesn't let you off the hook, right? The bassoons have not played a single note so far in this piece. What are they? What's their dynamic? Are the clarinets still mezzo piano? Right? If you listen to your mock-up, you'll notice that the clarinets are quite loud compared to the other instruments because they've just been marked. The other instruments have been either been marked piano or nothing, right? So if it's not marked anything, then it will sound mezzo forte, right? So the flutes are a little bit louder here, and then the clarinets are a bit, a bit edgier. They're still like according to what you told the Sibelius application back here, they're still mezzo piano, right? So what is going on here? Is everybody piano now here at this new section? So yeah, and I would break this beam right here. I should bring this back, right? Because so that means that this will just end here. Bum 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 bum. Some people might take issue with the fact that I cross the middle of the bar in this way, but I wouldn't have any problem reading this as a violist or a pianist or whatever. So yeah. So you've got this little dun 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 da da thing happening with the pizzicato violas and first violins transferring over to the second violins, and that is doubled by oboes and clarinets and so on. And then a kind of response from pizzicato double basses, bum bum bum, while the little leggermente passage plays octaves or unison, right? Now this is completely unnecessary. Leaving, this should just be C. Oops. I just hate the way this whole screen jumping around thing. It's not helpful. Right? So it would be better for this to be unison, right? Because what you're asking the bassoonist to do is to count the rest, right? You're asking them to go I just hate this screen jumping thing. Yeah, see, it's just like no matter what I do, it jumps around. So dumb. So rest, da 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 da. Right, and then here you write it in, but you have the other person go rest, da 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 da. I mean, that's kind of fun. I would really just have the different roles be the same, right? So this ba 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 bum should all be the responsibility of the first player, right? Just so they have it clear in their head. You have one player who is assigned to do the part that is tricky. That's their job. That is why they are the principal player, right? It doesn't mean that the secondary player can't get anything fun to do, but in a situation like this, you really should leave it the responsibility of one player so everything is very, very coherent and cohesive. All right, so as far as the whole architecture of this, I don't have any problem with that at all. I think it's really fun, and I think that it holds together really well. So, but just a few things like that, just really have your first bassoonist play all of the notes, and have the first bassoonist also play this da 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 thing. Okay. But other than that, I really found that it was quite enchanting, and I felt it really held together well. Very nice. Okay, and then the next part, hang on, I've got a slight problem here with my display. Let me just fix something. Okay. I've got two screens going, so it's a little strange. So you have just gone da 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 da. Oh yeah, one other thing I want to say, that it's just really this whole thing, arco, pizzicato, ba bum, ba ba ba, bo 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 bo, pizz da da. It is possible, but it's really a hassle. You know what I'm saying? Just give this pizzicato part all to the seconds. Same thing here, and this da 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 should just go to the first, right? There's no need for you to trade off like this. It's just more hassle than it's worth, right? you want your players to to be taking, especially something like this, which, by the way, Dominique, I think you've got a chance of this getting read or even played if you were to go ahead and orchestrate the rest of it and then maybe do a little bit more work on it. Then you got to have a chance of it getting played. All right, it's a really nice arrangement. So you want to do things that make the musicians want to play your works again, right? And this is not one of those things. This whole crossing over thing, in a situation where the first violinists would be seated to the left of the conductor and the seconds would be seated to the right of the conductor, then of course you'd have this thing that went back and forth. But even that is just fussy, and would the audience even notice, right? So just leave the pizzicato to the middle strings and have the seconds, or excuse me, have the firsts play the leggermente. All right. Okay. in which case it can just all be one, and you only have to have one leggermente text. All right. So now that that's over with, let's go on to the next part. Okay, so crescendo, we have no dynamic marking here on this contrabassoon part. Is this intended to be pianissimo still? Right? All right. And so on. All right. So here you've got pretty much, you've got the, and I'm not even sure who's playing what. Is this first flute? Is this both flutes? Is this both flutes? Is this one or two oboes, right? You have to tell, and like here you've used either part, right? You've had both first and second players, but then here you don't tell us who's playing what, who's on what instrument. You have to tell us, all right? You always have to put that in. Just, I should just make a checklist. Do you know what I'm saying? A checklist. Have you gone through the checklist? If you don't click that box when you submit your score, then you got to go back and look through the checklist. See, did you do all of the duet or one or two, indications of which player is playing? All right, so not to go on and on about this, but it's just, I think that in some of these evaluations, it's good for me to just really get back down to the basics and say, make sure you check those boxes when you send in a score. All right. So the next question is, is there an emphatic color of line? Yes, there is. Does the harmonic density set up the following part? I feel that you do, you do that with whichever horn this is this first or second, with this horn part coming in here, doubling the cellos. I think that's really nice. And then the one or two bassoons playing this right in here and so on. Okay. It's a little strange, though, how you're starting first violins, and then the second violins come in here, and then the violas come in here, and they're all unison together, right? I guess you want to sort of build up strength. And then here you have the one or two oboes come in and help solidify the flute line above. So, what if you just had first violin doubling the flutes, and you had the second violin taking over the first violin part, right? And then you had the oboe part, if you had the clarinet part doubling the second violin part and so on, right? Wouldn't that be a little bit more consistent? Of course, there's nothing wrong with the way that you scored it. It has a nice way of gaining strength, but it's still a little inconsistent, I feel. I feel like the clarinets could have supported the first violins all the way through, for instance. But I see you're holding it off here but there will be a sudden infusion of strength right in here, right? And then right in here with the oboe color mixing with the flutes, it will also be quite strong. I would only use single wind instruments here on this, right, until we get to here. And then I would say a due. Anything that goes to intervals here, have it be a due on the first note. Okay. But I think it's really wonderful, but I do think you need some kind of destination, right? And this could have been done with a hairpin rather than the crescendo mark. So, da 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 da. Because right, the way that you have scored it, there may be some players who will be tempted to go diminuendo coming out of this, right? So, I would say I think your intention is to go crescendo to forte by the fourth beat, right? So that should be marked in, especially with some of these other instruments, contrabassoon and horn and double bass and so on. So there should be a push. There's kind of no need to have a second voice here. Okay, so Option or Alt 1 gives us just this, right? And then I'll just select the rest in second voice and delete it. Wow, I just hate that screen jumping around thing. Okay, so so it's all détaché, or it's all single bows, right? So you just have to be careful that, are you going to be too choppy? But then on the other hand, you contrast it with nice slurs here, da, right? Which I feel is just really lovely. So I wouldn't suggest changing it. I think it's all fine. But here you might want to mark tenuto, just so that you get, so sick of that, so that you get that nice pulsing sound of portato, right? So your first violins will be going ba, and then your violas will be going right? And I just feel that the notes being kind of spelled out in that way helps to give them give them an identity. Otherwise, you might as well just be holding one long, like a dotted half note all the way through here, right? And not having separate notes. And then here you've got separate notes just in strings. And then once again, a nice big color. Same thing here. Second voice, right? You could go to portato here. Just any three notes that repeat. Watch, my screen's going to jump around again. So yeah, so same thing. These three C's here. And then once again, same thing as before. All right. But yeah, anyways, aside from all that, I think that this works really, really well. The whole question was, do you maintain the strength? No, but so long as you have crescendo to, say, forte, right in the forte mark here by the fourth bar, or fourth beat of this bar, and then this will be piano subito, right? So they're just like you're suddenly dropping down to piano again. And I think that contrast is very much in the period for this piece. All right, so now let's jump down intentionally. All right, and that takes us to the B section. So my evaluation criteria in that is, how's the phrase completed? I haven't been focusing on that, but you do it really well here, so that's not even worth talking about. So do you have a fresh new color here? And you don't, actually. You did violin plus oboe just like before, right? So it's not really a new thing, right? This is nice, though. Complementary timbre, violas plus clarinets. You can't go wrong in this style, right? But so it's all just really, just kind of doubling, but it works fine. The simplicity is nice. And then you have this one little horn going on through here. So like for natural horns, these are all going to be stopped or half-stopped notes, right? So I really feel like looking at the direction that your music is going here, especially kind of this this area in here, you've got E flat and F sharp and then a D, right? And then you're trilling on an A, right? I mean, this could be done as a lip trill, but like a lip trill as a half stopped, I mean, it just really looks to me like you are scoring for modern chromatic horns. So you might as well get rid of the whole affectation, shall we say, or the whole attempt to score for natural horns. Right. Let's get back to where we were. Okay. So yeah, so just if you come back to this, just score everything for modern chromatic horns, and take away, get out of C basso horn, and then this is all fine. So I feel that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about the function of the accents here. They really are intended for the middle pitch of the left-hand chords. So in this case, as written in F major, that's G sharp, G natural, G sharp, G natural, G sharp, G natural, right? So da 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 da. It's really not intended for the entire chord. Really, I mean, you could play the entire chord with more bite to it, but I think that it's just really that one note. So there are ways of like splitting the voices. Like for instance, here you could go. Let's see. Select the lower voice. I'm going to change it to second voice, and I'm going to take away. Right. So this might be a really great way of writing that out. See, so just the G sharp G natural thing is accented, right? And then here's a little cheat. Oops. Right. So, yeah. And then hide that. So anyway, but our main concerns here, right, is this thinking ahead to the widening gap. And I feel that you really hold off on that. It's like your harmony pretty much stays where the hands are, right? It doesn't really expand that much. And then in fact you widen things further in the melody by just adding an octave below, right? Trading off between divisi violas. So there's this. That means that when this happens, when we really do widen out, it's really quite big all of a sudden, right? So if there was any way for you to start to widen the harmony, say around here, or even like kind of going into it, just gradually widening things out, so that it wasn't such a big, huge shock. I think that would be more in keeping with the sort of the Beethoven style. And that there are some other things too in here, like here you have the harmonic idea sort of flowing downwards, right? Our chords progressing downwards, but then you have these sort of pedal tones on a sounding D, and I feel that that's really out of character for the material. But I mean, if you feel it, there's nothing hugely wrong with it except for the conflict that it creates with the sounding E here, right? And the C sharp kind of on either side of it, the way that it's written. It's a little weird. And the other thing too is by having these long held notes, you're distracting from this little fluttering, right? Because like the melody is turning into a pattern. That's the whole point of this B section, right? So da 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 ba 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 da 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 da, right? Or bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. If you want to cut out the little pattern parts of the figuration. So if you just sort of are having these long held notes, then we don't really get the sense of excitement here as much, I feel, right? So that's what I'm saying. Just really watch out for these sort of pedal tones, or sort of, they're not really pedal tones, but that's just that's a shortcut that people use to talk about long held notes within within harmonic motion around it, or melodic motion. So this is nicely done. This da 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 da, and then trading off between the two. I think that works really, really well, the way you divide it out. And this is real exciting in here too. I almost wonder, like, if if you're going to have this kind of frantic motion right in here, and you're already going to have nice strong horns covering a lot of this, whether or not the clarinets couldn't have doubled what's going on here in the violas. It's just a thought. But then, then you need your winds and brass and so on to push this open more and more. And this is nice too, the way that you have your first and second flute coming in and imitating the trade-off between the first and the seconds, and then continuing on as as this becomes more regular and not divided between the two players anymore. And then of course you have the second violins taking over the lower part from the violas. I think you could have done that earlier, right? Instead of going da 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 here with both parts, you could have had notes that were closer to this, interacting and just going straight into this pattern right away, right? Anyway, but that's all fiddling around, and you have a nice solid push here, and that's pretty good. All right, yeah, and then this, you probably noticed in the mock-up that this really seems like it's coming on strong, fast, and very sudden, right? So if you want to, like I said before, if you want to moderate that, if you want to ease into this better, right, then just start your build earlier. Okay, start expanding outwards with your harmony earlier. Yeah, and then all this kind of smashing, bashing stuff in here, that's all fun. The bassoons, or the trombones. So trombone, so if you're going to go A, so alto and bass, then this has to be tenor, right? Oops. Right? So that's how they need to look in the score. There are a few other things too. Here, divisi, there's no need to score divisi with a capital D, right? And the same thing here, pizzicato in caps, right? Shouldn't it be, right? Right, so just, and the same thing, arco doesn't need to have a capital letter at the beginning, right? So just, try not to call too much attention to the markings, right? Just make the markings smaller, because like when they're enormous like this, they really do attract a lot of attention. So as far as the structure here, I don't have a big problem. I think it's very bottom heavy though, right? Like they're just because you have all of these flurries happening here in the, kind of across the middle with the second violins, it doesn't mean that there can't be harmony behind it, right? I mean, more than just going toot, 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 toot with the oboe, right? There could have been, like, since your clarinets are not going to be heard anyways, against the bassoons and the horns and everything else, they might as well be supplying more central positions, right? I like the trills in here, though. That's nice. All right, coming to a close, and I mean, some of the other things, I think that you might have fallen into a slight trap here, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. Like, you left out your bassoon here, and like considering how strong the trombones here, they're kind of not even needed, but you could have left them in anyways, just so that the players could all play together, and it wouldn't be so boring for them. Like they could be doubling the cellos, for instance, right? Or they could be doubling the bass trombone. All right, so going on to the C section. Oops. So we've got, once again, we've completed our phrase. So do we have a new quality of tone here on this? Da 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 ba 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 ba. Okay, so one thing I want to point out to you is that by jumping up an octave like this, it doesn't have like the whole sense of the register very smoothly going from one to the next is taken away, right? You just have a sudden jump, right? Da 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 ba 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 ba. Do you see what I'm saying? It just suddenly, there's a sudden leap. And the same thing here, right? So I mean, if you like the leap, fine, It doesn't bother me at all. Yeah, and then just little bits of pizzicato in here. All right, I wonder why there was a second voice here. All right. All right. Da da dum. This is kind of nice. Horns, upper winds, and strings. I think that's a really nice color. Now, just because here's something that you do in this orchestration is a lot of times when you have tutis like this, you give like the top voice to the flute or flutes. Okay. Now, in classical music or classical period music, so say like, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, the flute is often used kind of as a sweetener on top, which gets absorbed, like the sound of it gets absorbed into the sound of strong first violins below. And that is almost going to happen here, right? Yeah, so because you've got this, this is all going to be piano dolce. There's no crescendo implied here, right? And then suddenly it's bum bum bum. The first violins are going to absorb the flutes into that. So if that's going to happen anyways, you might want to just have divisi octaves here in the first violins, right? Just like not always leave it to the flutes to play an octave higher than the first violins, okay? But I do like this one thing that you've got going on here, right? Like I mark in my notes. Is there a further contrast after this? And there is. You just go to just straight to strings, and then just like winds and second horn here. This should be just first horn, right? Da da dum. It's a beautiful color that you've got in here. Right. Okay. So right now we have to talk about one other thing. Do you really want all separate attacks on how many 16th notes in a row? Do you really want all of your wind players to be going ta 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 ta? Do you really want all of your string players to be playing separate bow strokes? Up down 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 up down, right? Ba 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 ba. Just because Beethoven doesn't have any slur marks over these lines doesn't mean that you have to withhold slur marks all the way into the point where he actually writes them in. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you are the god of this piece, right? You make all the decisions for it. You can put in any slur marks, any articulation marks, whether they work or not, right? So you do not have to just abide by Beethoven's particular ideas. But look, if you just, what if you had something like this, right? Say. Oops. And just everything smoothly connected. Sorry, let me change that to first voice. And so on, right? So let's say that you had this all smoothly connected, and then this, you had this slurred by beam group, right? So just right? Da 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 da. Right, and then occasionally you might want to just have separate. Maybe when you get to here, you could make it more exciting by having single tonguing and strokes and so on and so forth, and the clarinets and bassoons and the bowing and so on. And then we're back to the same quandary as before, right? Da 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 da. But this is a nice, smooth, seamless leading back, right? And I think that, just this is nice, that having a bit of slurring there. That does work pretty good, leading back to the beginning. All right, so, like I was saying before, like just having some fixing up with this piece, I do think that you could possibly get a reading at least, if there was something like that available around where you were at, or if you maybe fix up the entire movement and then work with an orchestration coach and see if you can get it performed as its own thing, like maybe as a, symphony sonata or some other kind of thing. Because I do think that you got some, you made some nice judgment calls here on the flow of things, the color, and the proportions. I really like the proportions going between the two, between the separate sections, right? I think that they're pretty nice. I like this big, beefy, chonky crescendo. Once again, I feel like you could gradually insinuate more energy as you go, right? So by the time you got to here, maybe you'd be more like around mezzo forte, right? Or mezzo piano at least. Right? So, I think you did really good work on this, Dominique, and I've been sitting here picking it apart for 40 minutes. But it's like there are a lot fewer problems in it than one might expect. And if this is your first attempt at scoring something on this level or on this scale, then I would say congratulations, good job. And if it's if you're more experienced and you were kind of hoping for everything to be absolutely perfect, then I think that you need to mark the entrances for all the different parts and the winds and everything else, right? And also you probably had a feeling that your natural horn parts are probably not really all that natural, right? So anyways, there's just a little bit of fixing for you to do in this, and I think that you could continue on with it and take it wherever you need to take it if you want to, or just use this as a lesson for the next thing that you do, possibly in orchestrating in a classical style, or just completely different genre or idiom or whatever. Who knows? Maybe your next job will be to score something in a crossover way, with a band or a choir or something like that. But anyway, whatever you end up doing, you've got some gifts here as an orchestrator, and I want you to pursue them. Okay? And nice work, well done. And I was, today I was just I was feeling a little tired, but I had started your evaluation a day or two ago, and I came back to it, and I just felt really inspired by the effort you put into this. So thank you for that.